Welcome to Office Events Tracking. In this section, I'd like to demonstrate how with Atom you're able to remove your file folders and go completely paperless using Atom's Office Events workflow. So to begin with, I'm going to walk you through step by step from the time the client comes through the office, goes to tax preparation, and goes to the other various steps throughout a tax office. So we'll start with Atom's self check-in screen. So we have this displayed in our lobby sitting on the counter. It's just a dedicated screen and it just displays the self check-in. From here the client will walk in and typically the receptionist will greet them still until they've learned the process and just let them know they need to enter their social security number at the check-in screen, just similar to how it worked when the airports moved over to the kiosks. You had you were being greeted and then you kind of were told what to do, and now you just know what to do. So it's the same thing that would happen when your tax office with the self check-in screen, and we've been using it for 3 years now, and now clients will just walk in and check themselves in. So I'm going to have this individual, Eric Anderson, is going to walk in, and I actually have an appointment with Eric, so I'll demonstrate what Eric would do. He'll walk in, enter this social, and we just have a 10 keypad sitting on the counter. We don't have the mouse around or a full keyboard because we don't want them to get in and cause any problems within the software. So a 10 keypad is all they would need, and they would just enter their social, hit enter. It's going to say, welcome back, Eric and Kathy Anderson. You have a scheduled appointment with Mark at 12:30. Then it's prompting them to go see the receptionist for the ID for the spouse needs to be updated and their social security cards. And it also mentioned that their status is prior year client. So what that did is it just linked them from the appointment scheduler, and now it's put them in the lobby, and I'll show you where the lobby is in a second. But it's also welcomed them in to the office, told them Mark will be right with them at 12:30, but it also said that there's some forms of ID that that we'd like to scan in before we begin the tax return. So now they're going to walk over to the receptionist because that's what they were asked to do. Now I'm going to go back to my other screen. I'll make this larger now. And to make the screen larger, if you hit the F11 key, that kind of expands it, gets rid of everything that's above. So it gives you a larger screen to work with. So let's see. Here they are in the lobby. Eric Anderson had an appointment with Mark Preco at 12:30. And the ID for the taxpayer looks good. The spouse's ID looks like it's expired. So they would go over to the receptionist. Then the receptionist would click on their name, come up here to upload client documents, scan her ID in. They would then remove. As you see here, let's see. Yeah, it's expired because today is now 11/29. So they would delete the old ID spouse, and they would browse. Once they scan it, grab the new ID, label it ID spouse, put a new expiration date, 14. They would save it, and they also would try to capture the social security cards if they were able to. Again, they would browse, grab social security card, label it social security card, save. Now they're uploaded, and that's all the receptionist would need to do. Now they would go back. Now we go back to the home page under lobby. Now Mark would come out, would greet Eric. Now if Mark forgot who Eric was, even though Eric's been with us for 7 years, we see here with retention, he could click on the ID, and his driver's license would pop up, the photo ID, so he could look at Eric prior to coming out. And properly greet Eric. So now Mark is ready to take Eric back. So he says, come on, Eric, let's go back to my office. So he's going to select on the edit pencil. And either Mark could do this or the receptionist could also do it. And then Mark could also do it from his own desk. We have a dedicated lobby screen sitting in our lobby, and as the preparers come in, they just move the client from the lobby to tax preparation. So here I'm going to move it down to tax preparation, and I save. Now I come back to my desk, and here they are in tax preparation. So now typically we have two monitors up. I have our tax software up on one screen, and I have Adam on the other screen. So I'm working. Eric hands me all the W-2s. I key them all in. I'm all finished with the tax return, and we look at the refund and or the amount due, and everything is fine. Everyone's in agreement. So now I'm ready to scan my documents in. So I click on Eric's name. That shoots me immediately into the client details. I come down here under return information, upload return documents, and we have some documents that are in here. This is a demo. Now I'm going to scan the W-2. So I have my scanner. I click the scan button, and this goes to the scan folder, goes to the folder I've created. Scanner marks desk. I save it. Now I come here and I browse. See, it's the same folder. It's always the last one. Double click it. Reviewer documents. Save it. And let's see, 1129. I view it. And there's a W-2. Close it. So that's what the basic. Before I used to. The typical way would be we had a file folder. We would then put the W-2s in there. We then would move it to the next stage, which may be cashier or reviewer. But now we don't need a file folder anymore. Now we're attaching the source documents right to the client file within Adam. So from here, I hit back to client, and I'm going to delete the payments out here so I can demonstrate how we do this. We then, now the tax preparer, they know what the fee is. Say it's $125. The tax software just calculated it for us. Now I'm going to select transaction type. I'm going to hit tax prep. I'll go ahead and log my fee in. And say they're going to pay with cash. So now I'd move them to the cash. Oh, one more step I forgot. Once I will then print the 8879 out, have them sign it. I then scan that in. And again, that was another document that we used to keep in the file folder. But now I'm going to attach it to their electronic folder here within Adam. So I go back to upload return documents. I'll browse, grab it. Now I name it signature documents, and I save. And as you see, the scanner we have is not Twain compliant, but because the flow within Adam, with the flow of the office, I'm actually in the client file all the time, so it's not a problem with me just scanning the document. It goes to the folder, then I browse, I grab it. I mean, it's so fast that we didn't see the need to actually have a Twain compliant scanner and build it so it would actually feed right into the software, because we're already in the file folder anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. So now I'm going to go back to the client. So now I'm all done with the client. I hand them the tax return. I give them their source documents back. I give them the 8879 back. I have no paper anymore. Now I said, thank you for coming in. Now would you like to go to the cashier and make your payment? Now if you're a smaller office, you may collect the payment right there, and that's fine too. It all depends on how large your office is. We actually have a cashier. So then I would guide them out to the cashier. But before I do that, I move the status to cashier, save it. And now they're talking to the cashier, and I'm actually going back to the lobby screen to grab another client, and I take them back to my office. So now I'm going to pick it up from the cashier stage. So now I pull up the cashier. I see that they owe $125. And I'd say, Eric, how would you like to pay? He said cash. I click on his name. I come down here, he hands me $125 in cash. I then select the transaction type, payment cash, and now the payment amount is going to default to whatever the client transaction balance is, $125. I selected cash, payment method cash. I save it. And say if he wants a receipt, I can just come up here, print transaction history. And this can be either be a receipt or it could be an invoice for him. In this case, it shows there's a 0 client balance. I print that off, hand it to him if he needs a receipt, and then he leaves the office. So from here, I'm going to then move it to reviewer. I save the return. Now, typically we have quite a few client files stack up in reviewer, and as our reviewer comes in, they'll start reviewing the return. So what they do is they click on reviewer. From here, they can see payment method was cash. It's not in a rush. It's not a RAL that needs to be transmitted before 11. So we just would go ahead and review that as we have time. And to do that, I just click on Eric's name. I then move it to review to in review, save it. And the reason we move it from review to in review is because we don't want two people reviewing the same return at the same time, which did happen. So now when I move it to in review, if I go back to my home page in review, now it shows who's actually reviewing the return. So even if you did select it two at the same time, you could see who selected it first. So from here, I go back to my file. Excuse me. Now I'll have two screens, tax software up on one and Atom on the other. I click Return Documents, Upload, and from here I can go ahead and pull up my W-2. Excuse me. And I'll review the W-2, make sure it was entered correctly. Any other source documents, I can compare them to the tax software, make sure everything was prepared correctly by the preparer. And I also can verify my signature documents, make sure everything was signed. So everything looks good. Now I'm ready to move it to the next stage, which from here is going to be EF ready. Save it. I also compare my payment, make sure the proper payment was collected. So the reviewer is actually double checking the return, double checking the payment was received properly and recorded properly, and also double checking to make sure all the documents were put in the right file. That's why I like scanning the documents at the tax preparer level, is because they get double checked to make sure everything was put in the right file. Whereas if you scan after the fact, typically nobody is double checking to make sure that that person who did the scanning put the documents in the correct file. So now I'm in EF ready. So when we're ready to file the returns, again, we stockpile usually, say we send 20 or 30 at a time. I'll have my tax software up on one screen, and I'll have Atom on the other. I'll see which documents are ready to be sent. In this case, we have the cash payment. In fact, I might change that to a RAL. I just showed you how we handle cash payment. I'm going to change this over to a payment method RAL to show you what it looks like in the EF ready. I'm going to go back into Eric's file. And I'm just going to go ahead and edit this and change it to RAL. And save it. Now I go back to my home page. Now I go to EF ready. And now you see we have RAL is highlighted in red, and it actually is listed at the top within EF ready because we want to make sure all the RALs are sent first. So, and it also says who reviewed the return. So from here, I'm going to check the box, and I'm going to go over in my other screen within our tax software and check the box too. So I'm actually e-filing in our tax software, and I'm just tracking it within Atom. So now when I'm done, I'll hit send. It says, are you sure you want to send one client? And hopefully it says the same thing to my tax software. I just slide OK. And from here, it moves to awaiting IRS acknowledgments. So now as the acknowledgments come through, in your tax software, and if you're using Drake, TaxWise, or Crosslink, then you just have to select on the home page to pull the acknowledgement forward. And now with TaxWise, it's supposed to happen every, I think it's going to happen every 3 to 4 hours. So that your acknowledgments will come over. So here I see the federal acknowledgement code accepted. My refund method, it was an approved RAL. So now I can print a check, and there's a payment method RAL. So if I have, say, 50 or 100 within here, all I have to do is select the master checkbox at the top, this is then from here, if I hit send, based on the refund method, Atom knows where to move this to. So because this is approved rail, it's going to move this down to check pickup. If it was a declined rail, it would move it to declined rail. If it was a refund method, say direct deposit, it would move this to complete. The status would be complete because then there's nothing more to do. Now, if you're not using Drake TaxWise or Crosslink, you can now move them easier with our new feature. I could just select as many I wanted to move to check pickup, and I'd hit check pickup here and hit go, and then that would kind of manually move it. Whereas, let me move this. With the send button, I can move it to every event in one push of the button. So I hit send, hit OK. Now I'm going to move down here to check pickup, and there's Eric right there. Approved rail. Now it even says the date because this is a demo, so it shows the date. Check was actually printed. It's already been cleared on March 24th. And again, now you see the IDs are popping up. So when the client comes in to pick up their check, we could verify who they are by just selecting the ID, and their ID would pop up. So from here, client's going to walk in. If this is a bank product, the client walks in, picks up their check, and I just click on their name, come back into upload return documents. I pull their check from we actually don't have it in a folder, but we have them all alphabetized. I then have them sign it, then I take it back, I scan it, and then I upload it, and I label it check stub. So now everything's stored within the client file, within Atom. And then from here, I'm going to then take it and then move it to complete. And then I save it. So now there's nothing more to do with this file, with this client. They received their money. Now I moved them to complete. I have the check stub signed. It's stored in here, and everything is in its proper place. Now I go back to my home page. If, as you see here, we have quite a few different office events from pending. If you weren't able to complete the return, you could put it in pending, label it it's client pending, or if it's X-Tax pending, excuse me, which would be your tax office, maybe your tax office isn't able to complete the return for various reasons. If they filed an extension, if it was an IRS reject, if they got up and walked because they weren't happy with the refund or your fees. So we can track, as soon as they walk through that door, you're now going to track everything that happens to that client. So if I go back to Eric's file, do a search for him, and I go ahead and view the details on Eric. And I go to my events page. This page is tracking everything, all the office events for that particular client. So originally when they came in the lobby, say on March 22nd, went all the way through the process, and we had them come back through the lobby again. So it'll track every stage where that client was in your office and who worked on them and how much time it was spent on each one of them. So these are what I like to call them as like the cookie crumbs. It leaves a trail of where that client or that client's information went throughout your office and who worked on it. So you could always hold people accountable. And it's automatic. It's being done automatic because it's just a normal workflow of your office. So it's by removing file folders and removing paper from your office, you create more checks and balances. The flow is actually better, and it's more efficient, and you can see what's going on as a manager or an owner, what's going on in your office all the time. And it doesn't matter which office either. I can go ahead and switch to another office, South Cedar. I can go to Jackson. I can see what's going on in each one of the offices. So for reviewing purposes, our slower offices actually review the returns of our busier office. So the key is putting those documents in place with the client so that everybody can access them. So within Atom, everybody can access that document, and you could hit it as many times as you want simultaneously. It wouldn't make a difference. So that's all I had for office events tracking or office workflow. Thank you.